Today, Donald Trump spoke at the Values Voters Summit. This is the first time that a sitting president has ever spoken at it. There are reasons for that, since it's a virulently anti-gay and in many cases anti-woman gathering of people. And you are going to love his commentary. We're going to break this down in a number of different ways, but I just want to touch on one thing that he said first. He was talking about his the disaster relief effort that's ongoing, him traveling to Texas and Puerto Rico, and he also said that he traveled to the Virgin Islands, which of course were absolutely destroyed in a way that even other hard-hit areas weren't. And he went there and he spoke to their leader, the president of the Virgin Islands, which is odd because he is the president of the Virgin Islands since it's an unincorporated territory of the United States. So that's worrying that he went there and didn't seem to know who the person was he was speaking to. They have a governor, not a president. But more importantly, I mean, that's what people are joking about. But my fear is, if he thinks they have a president, does he not know that we're responsible for what happens there? I mean, can you really trust his disaster relief efforts if he thinks they have their own fully separate government and what, we're their ally or something like that?
Why does he think it says the US Virgin Islands?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. On the other hand, I think he had to walk through the Puerto Rico thing. I mean, I'm sure they did it in a way so as not to piss him off, but I don't think he fully understood, Mr. President, we have to take care of Puerto Rico, or this country, that is America. Puerto Rico.
Yeah, no. To answer your question, literally, John, does he not know that the Virgin Islands are American territory and unincorporated? Are you kidding me? Okay, does he not know? Of course he doesn't know, of course.
Yeah, unless there's a Trump property there, I don't think he's even really, he could even find the Virgin Islands on it.
Well, that's worrying. Now,
but can I just say one last thing about that? Guys, just think about, like, okay, so he doesn't know. I keep using the two professions are plumber and dentist. You're a plumber in North Carolina, you're a dentist in Connecticut. You don't know what the current status of the Virgin Islands is. It's totally fine. You're the president, the Virgin Islands have been affected. You're going to talk about it. And if you're not sure, can you just do 10 seconds of homework and ask an aide, you have 1,000 of them, right? Hey, what's the deal with the Virgin Islands, right? How should I refer to their leader? Oh, Mr. President, actually you're their leader, okay, and that happens to be the governor. Okay, great, oh, thank God you told me before the cameras were on, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't care to do that 10 seconds of homework.
Yeah, he has a team that went with him. My question is, how many times did he refer to the governor as president and nobody would correct him? But yeah, that's scary.
By the way, that's a great point. There's a whole Emperor's New Clothes thing going on with Trump. And then once in a while, when he steps in it big time, like he did with this, I'm just talking about in terms of a public relations thing, he steps in it big time. I mean, he's stepping in it from a big time in public policy all the time.
Yeah.
But when he says something that's totally funky, like, oh shit, what do we do with this? I think that's when we end up,
Yeah, and this is scary. I mean, the Virgin Islands is absolutely destroyed. Obviously, Puerto Rico, it's been weeks and weeks, and it's still in an absolutely horrible condition. I read that they had to put out a warning to tell people not to drink from sealed containers in Superfund sites because of the contamination through toxins and also potentially nuclear stuff. But the people are having to do that because there's absolutely no water. Weeks into this disaster, American citizens are having to drink toxic fluids because they don't want to literally die of dehydration. And we have a guy who doesn't even know what territories he's responsible for and what aren't. We have higher standards, and there are more consequences for rock stars who say the wrong city when they open a show than the president when he visits the governor of a US territory. And that's a scary state for us to be in.
If you like the Young Turks, you'll love Young Turks membership. TYTnetwork.com/join.